My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture. We are delighted to have with us tonight Dr. Heidi Kasevich, who's going to be talking with you about the power of quiet, rescuing solitude in a distracted, extroverted world. Please join me in a really warm virtual welcome for our friend, Dr. Heidi Kasevich. Take it away, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Charlene. It is always such a pleasure to join you and the Parent Venture and the entire Parent Venture community in sharing my ideas and thoughts, and hopefully galvanizing communities to really think differently about quiet, about introverts, and about how we can create more introvert inclusive classroom and family environments for all of our children. So I really appreciate it. You are a wonderful friend and colleague, and the entire Parent Venture. I really, really honor what you are doing. So please know that as I launch into my presentation tonight, The Power of Quiet, Rescuing Solitude in a Distracted, Extroverted World. So I'd like to begin with an overview. So we've come to believe that stimulation means that our lives have more meaning. This is especially damaging for introverts who have lower thresholds for stimulation than do extroverts. So what are the costs of living in a noisy world? What are the benefits of solitude? And how can we bring quiet times and spaces into our lives? So these are the key issues I'll be covering tonight. Stay tuned. Any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer at the end of my presentation. So my approach to rescuing solitude is rooted in the cultural context of the extrovert ideal. My work in schools and workplaces across the nation shows that we tend to associate a leader with someone who is daring, alpha, gregarious, and bold. He takes charge rather than takes care, and he gives orders rather than listens to others. As one educator affirms, leadership is a popularity contest where kids are expected to run the show, to be chiefs. And the so-called halo effect ensures that extroverted leaders, thinking on one's feet, delivering rousing speeches, and loving the spotlight, are often perceived as more effective because they fit the stereotype of a successful leader in 21st century America. For example, introverted leaders, students, often end up feeling as though they do not have leadership potential because they are not inclined to be loud or outgoing, to love the podium, or to be in control. They often feel misjudged, misunderstood, or overlooked in our schools today across the nation. Susan Cain in Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, drawing on historian Warren Sussman's work, connects the extrovert ideal, charming, charismatic, outgoing, action-oriented personalities, to the rise of the industrial and media ages, which have made it seem as though you couldn't succeed in life unless you were a fast-talking, charming, charismatic salesman. A stark contrast to the culture of character of the late 19th century, which valued inner strength, integrity, and the good deeds you performed while no one was looking. As author and psychologist Linda Silverman states, the American dream is to be extroverted. We push our children to be people who need people. Research shows that companies would rather hire people who are outgoing. As HR leaders report, companies that use personality profiling tools as part of their assessments tend to eliminate candidates who show up as introverts. In schools, educators often define participation as quantity of speech and assign a grade to the number of times kids raise their hands in our classes. Silence often connotes insecurity, resistance, or boredom. Often, an educator pauses just 1 second before calling on students. Those who process information quickly are at an advantage under these conditions. Research shows that talkative people have been rated as smarter, better looking, more interesting, and more desirable as friends. Another study found that a person's actual influence is often overlooked for airtime, the amount of time they spend speaking. Our schools and workplaces tend to be crowded, noisy places where the walls have come down, so that it can be hard to find a place for privacy. There is an expectation for constant social interaction as collaboration and group work dominate our working and learning experiences. As one student said, you're always expected to be doing something or going somewhere and are discouraged from spending time alone. As part of our cultural ethos, we see the ambitious as action-oriented and time poor. Busyness has become a status symbol. What's noise? There's empirical evidence to show that life today is noisier than ever before. From televisions to speakers, from electronic device notifications to open floor plans. As Lee Mars and Justin Zorn define it in their fantastic book, Golden, noise refers to any unwanted interference and distraction in our lives at the informational, auditory, and internal levels of our perception. In a world of constant informational connection, we are tempted at every moment of the day to view YouTube videos, respond to text messages, and post videos on Instagram or other platforms. Studies show that our dependence on digital activity that instantaneously connects us with others is at an all-time high. Regardless of age, over 50% of Americans today say that they would feel anxious if they lost their phone for just 1 day, a sign of smartphone addiction. Ryan Holiday, in another fantastic book, Stillness is the Key, cites the CNN effect, whereby 24-hour media coverage makes it hard to be anything but reactive. There's so much detail that everything is under the microscope. Speculation is rampant, and the mind is overwhelmed. In a world of noise, it is more difficult than ever to make intentional, meaningful decisions and to integrate ourselves with the outside world. Without silence and solitude, we are living, and here's the kicker, fragmented, distracted, and interrupted lives. Fragmented, distracted, and interrupted lives. Example, when it comes to being distracted, a bright billboard on the highway is the case in point. Driving along the freeway, trying to focus on maintaining a constant speed, avoiding the occasional wayward vehicle, drivers can be easily distracted by neon lights that shine in the name of some product that one should consider purchasing at a low price. Trust me, I know. When the police sirens flare behind you, you realize that you unintentionally, and again, trust me, I know, exceeded the speed limit when looking at that neon sign. As for auditory noise, let's focus on both airports and hospitals. The term noise pollution was coined in the 1960s when scientists found that the loud sounds from roads and planes are associated with a myriad of health concerns, including high blood pressure, sleep loss, and heart disease. Excessive noise in hospitals, and for those of you who are interested, I'm going to add this, it's noise that exceeds 35 decibels as established by the World Health Organization from such things as beeping instruments and ventilation systems. These inhibit a patient's ability to recover. Such noise can cause harm, high blood pressure, increased risk of heart attack, and think about it, in a place dedicated specifically a hospital for healing. I need to go back in time for a moment to quote Florence Nightingale, who led a staff of nurses in what is present-day Istanbul during the Crimean War, the late 1850s. She said, "Unnecessary noise is the most cruel absence of care which can be inflicted on the sick or the well." And I've actually included here a photo. I was on this airplane flying over the Rockaway Peninsula over Queens. And I know what it's like to be on the ground right near JFK Airport in a home where there's constant air traffic. This looks beautiful. It looks quiet. I can tell you that on the ground, it's not the same. So about 10 years ago, the Atlantic Systems Guild studied the Coding War Games, a series of competitions that tested software engineers' abilities and compared the output of more than 600 computer programmers at 92 companies. They wanted to know what accounts for the performance gap between highly productive companies and less productive companies. Their findings? There was an enormous performance gap, like literally 10 to 1, that was not related to experience, salary, or time spent completing the job. In fact, the big difference, here it is on the screen, the open office plan. It was in fact the workers who had the most privacy, personal space, and control over the physical environment, oh, I should add freedom from interruption, that performed the best. So what about auditory noise in schools? So that open plan classroom, a design from the 60s and 70s, which is still alive and well in the United States, has unintended negative effects on learning. Intrusive noise from classrooms in surrounding areas reduces speech intelligibility. Speech perception is impaired by the background noise that comes with this open plan, where classrooms are separated by flimsy dividers or bookshelves. It's harder to listen, harder to receive and process information. I find this study particularly relevant to the development of literacy in 7 to 10-year-old students. Reading fluency development is greater for students being taught in enclosed classrooms than it is for those in open classroom environments. Okay. What about inner chatter? How we talk to ourselves. Inner monologues, which often include negative self-talk, can dominate our soundscape just as much as external noise. And we often don't think of it this way. This can cause anxiety and other forms of psychological distress. Based on Ethan Kross's groundbreaking research on the science of internal dialogue in chatter, the voice in our head, why it matters, and how to harness it, he cites that internal interference from our own minds can turn what might be a peaceful moment of respite when alone into an experience akin to being bullied on a playground. In fact, Kross estimates that most of us today listen to the approximate equivalent of about 320 State of the Union addresses worth of inner monologues on any given day. It's a veritable hurricane of internal noise. So how does all of this environment with excessive noise affect introverts? So we need to begin with a basic understanding of what you need to know about introversion, extroversion. Introversion, extroversion, the north and south of temperament, about 40 to 50% heritable. It accounts for about half of our identities. Introversion fundamentally has to do with your sensitivity to stimulation from the outside world. Introverts feel most happy and alive in quiet settings and show a sensitivity to social and sensory stimuli, from crowds to bright lights to a loud bang. Such high reactivity to input from the outside world is detectable in babies as young as 4 months of age. Here I'm citing Kagan and Schwartz from Mass General and Harvard Medical. So these babies show signs of distress when reacting to a variety of stimuli, such as a mobile swaying overhead, balloons popping, by arching their backs, crying, or thrashing their legs or arms. These are the ones who just might salivate more when tasting a tart stimulant such as lemon juice, according to the pioneering work of Hans Eysenck in 1967. So if you have a lemon nearby, you might just want to slice it up and see whether you kind of enjoy it or you don't. It's a very simple way to kind of figure out whether you are more introverted or more extroverted. Do you salivate more? Do you salivate less? What is your threshold for that particular stimulant of the lemon? This is really important. Stimulation can feel quite painful, especially if it's intense. So introverts are driven to reduce outside stimulation as a way to find their sweet spot between quiet on the one hand and social activity on the other. So ask yourself and think about your child. Did you, as a baby, cry or thrash around when in places where there was lots of noise? Did you shut down, cling to a safe person, or have even a meltdown in face of crowds, new people, and situations, or really, really busy environments? And does this happen today? These are really key questions for you to ask about yourself to gain self-awareness, and also just to think about your child or your student. Really important. And I just have to add, so the image here is of me in lower school, I believe. My reaction to the overstimulating Halloween event was to don a pilgrim costume, to be as somber as possible and just try to keep to myself, rather than engaging in what to me felt just like a very overstimulating Halloween parade. So just as a quick overview of the way introversion, extroversion affects who we are, you want to think about personality preferences as they connect to our biogenetic natures, right? And going back to that, what I just said about reactivity to social and sensory stimuli. So those translate into, I'm going to zone in on 3 personality preferences. So the first is your social style. For the extrovert, I prefer small gatherings and one-on-one conversations. For the extrovert, I thrive on group work and meeting new people. The recharging style. The introvert, I need to spend time alone after team events and socializing. For the extrovert, I'm exhausted. What shall we do together after school? And the processing style. For the introvert, I prefer to think before I speak. Please don't call on me. For the extrovert, I process my ideas out loud. I am usually one of the first to raise my hand. Introverts, it's important to note, can also be prone to overthinking, to rumination. And if you connect this with Ethan Kross's work, to negative self-talk. Burnout is real. If an introvert acts out of character as a pseudo-extrovert, as one can do, we can stretch ourselves in any environment. We can engage in, as an introvert, in lots and lots of social activities. You don't have to don the pilgrim costume. You could put on the queen costume and, be the princess for the evening. But that's just a small example, but if you do that over and over again, to the point of self-negation, it can lead to severe health problems. And Dr. Brian Little has researched this, including anxiety and compromised immune functioning. So the overstimulated introvert can end up in a state of pretty severe burnout. Okay, so let's shift to solitude and the benefits of solitude. So contrary to popular belief, silence is not simply the absence of noise. Solitude involves being present and awake, enlightened to our thoughts and our surroundings, and able to lead life with purpose and intention. In silence, we find our authentic selves so that we can interact more intentionally with others. Silence is beneficial for both introverts and extroverts. It's a really important point. Embedding opportunities for silent reflection in our lives allows us to build self-awareness, enhance motivation, deepen knowledge, and spark imagination. Solitude is the catalyst for mindful awareness, innovation, compassion, and authentic joy. So the neuroscience of solitude. Experiencing aloneness can benefit the body as well as the mind and spirit. A groundbreaking Duke University study demonstrated that just 2 hours of silence per day prompts cell development in the hippocampus, the brain region associated with the formation of memory that involves the senses. And furthermore, this is very important, other studies show that depression is related to the slowing of cell growth in the hippocampus. So it's not surprising that adolescents who spend more time alone are less likely to feel depressed. Prolonged and repeated exposure to silence, where the brain rests quietly, allows us to be less reactive to complex situations in our social and digital worlds, gathering ourselves and our thoughts to later share with others. Thus, paradoxically, solitude allows us to develop deeper connections with others. Solitude allows us to develop deeper connections with others. So in addition to improving our health, exposing ourselves to periods of solitude can help us to regain our balance, our well-being. Dr. Brian Little coined the term restorative niche to describe a physical or a mental place where we go to recuperate after flexing outside of our comfort zone. It's the place where we return to be our true selves. So as an example, for the extroverted educator who has just spent a free period preparing for afternoon classes, recharging could include spending time in a busy lunchroom. For an introverted educator who has just taught 3 periods in a row, recharging might mean spending solitary time, meditating or listening to music, or in my case, where there was really not a lot of recharge space in my school, just heading to the ladies' room and quietly just taking a few moments to gather myself before I had to go back to the busy school environment. It's so important to note that taking time alone to restore is not synonymous with antisocial behavior. We need to really tell this to ourselves and to our students and to our children. It's essential for the well-being of introverts in school, particularly in school environments, which are notoriously busy and noisy places that often demand a schedule that does not allow for quiet rejuvenation. As one educator affirmed that I interviewed for my forthcoming book, I had a student who would come to my classroom periodically and just say, "I just need to recharge here," because it was quiet. And I tried to make spaces in the room for the kids to recharge. Another benefit of solitude, resilience. Resilience fundamentally has to do with rebalancing. It's the skill of noticing our own thoughts and unhooking from the non-constructive ones so that we can see setbacks as opportunities for growth. Not easy to do. The opposite of resilience is perfectionism. In other words, the more you lean towards perfectionism, the harder it will be for you to recover when you encounter difficulties in life. According to my dearly beloved mentor, Dr. Joanne Deek, perfectionism shuts down the resilience part of the brain. We need to convey to our students that they don't have to be perfect all the time and that they can only be at peace with their mistakes when they examine them and learn from them and not bury them. We often think of resilience as a character strength that can grow with effort by simply trying harder or practicing longer. While this may be true in some circumstances, there is another part of the story. Research shows that a resilient child is a well-rested one. Overwork and exhaustion are the opposite of resilience. A rested child is more self-aware and thus able to regulate their emotions, which can often lead to higher achievement during any school activity, including tests. Move on to solitude and creativity. To foster creativity, it's critical to create solitary experiences for students of all personality styles. Given the pervasiveness of the extrovert ideal, collaboration, and noise in our school cultures, we need to normalize solitude by intentionally teaching students about its benefits. The ability to think about one thing at a time. Multitasking dilutes the quality and efficiency of what we're trying to accomplish. The ability to recognize creative impulses and pursue them, free from distracting stimuli. Solitude also creates the ideal context for the state of flow, a state characterized by complete absorption, concentrated, and joy, and the subjective loss of time. As research by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi demonstrated, flow is an optimal state in which one feels totally engaged in activity. In this state, the individual is free from rewards, money, status, prestige. When in flow, I have to say, as I was when writing my dissertation, it's one of the most joyful experiences of my life. All aspects of performance are heightened, including creativity. Or as humanist psychologist says, solitude enables the inward elements of our brain to function optimally. Last point about the benefits of solitude: mastery. Just as solitude nurtures resilience and creativity, it enhances our ability to master various skills. K. Anders Ericsson famously coined the term deliberate practice to describe the focused solo practice that can lead to mastery of any subject or activity. Ericsson's research found that top athletes, musicians, chess players, and academics don't necessarily excel because they're smarter or more genetically gifted than their competitors. Rather, gaining independent mastery involves careful reflection on what worked and didn't work during practice time. And such practice is best conducted alone. Helping students gain mastery, we can help them by setting aside ample time for solitude, helping them set a goal that's not too hard, not too easy, and practice just beyond your comfort zone for even 15 to 20 minutes a day. And it's incumbent upon us as parents and teachers, educators, those who care about, those who are trying to gain mastery, to offer feedback at regular intervals. Okay, let's move on from the benefits of solitude to strategies for bringing quiet times and spaces into our kids' and our students' lives. First, and this is really important, acknowledge that it's hard to get permission to be alone, because being alone can often be seen as being antisocial or a loner. So for quiet spaces, or I like to call them also sanctuaries, introverts need control over light and noise, sensory balance with calm, warming influences. So there's an introvert-friendly educator from the Midwest whom I interviewed for my forthcoming book, who took charge of pioneering a quiet space initiative in her school after seeing the positive effects of creating and installing a quiet nook in her classroom. With a keen eye to the working and recharging style of her introverted students, she stocked this quiet corner of her classrooms with books, clipboards, puzzles, and mind games. As she states, in nearly every room in the lower school, there was now a quiet corner. a cozy corner, somewhere where the kids can go when they're feeling like, I need to separate. And she continues, I love this part of the interview. It's usually the child who decides, I need to go and work in this quiet space. But of course, we need to offer that quiet space. This is not a punishment space, which I think in years past, it always was when someone was misbehaving. I certainly grew up with this. Be quiet, and that was a punishment. Instead, this quiet corner, it's an inviting space with tactile things such as glitter jars, squishy balls, anti-stress balls, things, but it's a place to go to relax, to recharge. And I love the idea, if it's possible, of inviting students to co-create a place of refuge. It's a way to boost the self-esteem and creativity of introverts and extroverts alike. This is what Superman did when he created his fortress of solitude. It's going to be just a way of thinking about it. So if we do that, and if you design a creativity challenge, this could be at home or at school, consider some of the following questions. Where will your quiet space be located? Will there be pictures on the wall or not? Will there be just a couple of objects or many objects? Will there be quiet music or will there be no music at all? And so in this way, we invite our students, again, to co-create their own quiet nook. So let's shift from quiet spaces to quiet times. For an introvert, this is going to come as no surprise at this point. Knowing when alone time can occur is critical. Set up a time to recharge after a comfortable stretch with no pressure to socialize. I love the concept of an energy management calendar. It's my version of a time management calendar. It can be daily, weekly, or monthly. But it can be immensely helpful to normalize the quiet counterpoints that are needed, the negotiables in our schedules. Obviously, there are non-negotiables, but the quiet counterpoints can be the negotiables. And I have to add, I've done a lot of work with mixed temperament, introvert, extrovert families, partners, couples. Sit down, set up your energy management calendar, particularly before a weekend or a vacation, so that you have the needs met of the diverse and probably rather divergent recharging alone time needs of the members of your family. It's going to be a game changer, honestly, for peace and harmony in a family. Okay, here's the big one. Digital noise. I fundamentally believe that in order to take control of the digital noise in our lives, we need to role model this for our students. So, no email Fridays, no meeting Wednesdays, no electronic communication after 5 p.m. on work days, and none on weekends. This is a great way for us to start to get control of our devices. There's a fantastic book by Amy Blankson, How Technology Can Be Part of a Happy Life, which I love that title. She advises us, and this is certainly something we can share with our children and our students, start with a list of digital intentions so as to avoid what can be a trap of constant distraction from our electronic devices. So here's some questions. How much time do I want to spend online today? When will I turn off notifications and for how long? And here's the kicker. It takes 11 minutes to get back into the flow of work after spending just 2 seconds reading a text message. So those intentional questions, how much time do I want to spend online today? When will I turn off notifications and for how long, are really important for us to share, well, to implement for our own selves, and then to share with our children and our students. So what about that internal chatter that Ethan Kross spoke about? How can we break free from what can become that bondage of our internal voices? So here's the tip. Try using the second person you rather than I, when it comes to negative self-talk. Research shows that you is linked with less activation in brain networks associated with rumination, leads to improved performance under stress, wiser thinking, and less negative emotion. It's not, you don't want to say like, I am a failure. You could say, you made a mistake. So another way to think about our experience from this distance perspective, and that's the key word, distance, is to imagine what you might say to a friend experiencing the same problem as you, distance. Think about the advice that you would want to give to that friend and then apply it to yourself. So it's all about broadening your perspective. We want to break free from what can feel like the bondage of negative self-talk. Another idea is to launch a quiet power club after school. This is something I've helped many schools do across the country. I love the concept of a quiet power club. You can invite students to simply head outside, start walking silently just for a half hour or so. Encourage students to reflect, make new connections, and activate their senses during the walk. No AirPods. See what you discover. See what you observe in new ways. I actually did this morning while taking a beautiful walk with my 3-year-old dog, Coco. We stopped and we looked at a bunch of flowers, which were in full bloom in SoCal. And I think we're still in the month of March. They were beautiful. I stopped. I took my AirPods out, which was really important. And I saw the world in a new way. And then once you go back, say to the schoolhouse, and I do have a curriculum, a 9-lesson curriculum for a quiet power club. You can ask students to document what they were thinking and what they saw along the way, drawing, storytelling, even doodling. Did you happen to gravitate towards a particular issue, object, action, person? Did you think of things in new ways? So the power of quiet in a quiet club. And finally, and I'd like to thank Charlene for pointing me in the direction of the Silent Book Club, which you can find online for adults. You could actually start and role model this for your students. It's like kind of like a version of the Quiet Power Club. It's a silent book club. All you need to do is gather a few people together in a cafe, for example. Bring your favorite book. The only direction is to read together. And I want to go back to Henry David Thoreau, who did venture into the woods to write his masterpiece, Walden. But he did believe, and this is not commonly known, that we can find solitude anywhere, even in a crowded lecture hall or a cafe reading together. It's the solitude of the mind that matters the most. The willingness to turn inward, to think for oneself, and have a mind apart from others. So I'd like to conclude by telling you that you can reach me for consulting, speaking engagements, or executive coaching at hkasevich@gmail.com. It is through professional development workshops, keynote speeches, and executive coaching that Case Leadership facilitates the courageous conversations needed to create communities of belonging where introverts are as valued as their extroverted counterparts for their ability to learn and lead. And I think, as I've mentioned in my forthcoming book, Silent Talk, Setting the Stage for Introverts to Thrive, I delve much more deeply into this topic of rescuing solitude. And the book provides research-based strategies to create introvert-friendly classrooms and nurture quiet leaders. And finally, I'd like to end by once again quoting humanist psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman: "Solitude is a muscle." So here's to embedding opportunities for quiet in our daily lives. Thank you. I turn this back over to Charlene.
Oh, Heidi, thank you so much, Dr. Kasevich. We are getting people applauding. That was really wonderful. I was labeled shy when I was 2, and it's taken me almost a lifetime to figure out some parts that are true and some parts of that aren't true. But I honor everything that you said tonight, and I know everybody appreciated it. We have some great questions. Thank you, audience. So let's get started. Dr. Kasevich, I've heard you say that quiet and solitude are important for all students, not just introverts. Can you explain that?
So solitude is really the container that we need to bring back into our lives, I believe, because it's kind of disappearing. That will help us connect with ourselves, to help us ultimately self-regulate when it comes to, particularly with adolescence and really supercharged emotions. We can come back to ourselves, connect with ourselves, and the research about solitude and creativity is really mind-boggling, right? That we need that container of quiet so that the mind can really settle down, get into a state of flow, before we just start talking. So I think it is absolutely essential for introverts and extroverts alike. That said, with the amount of noise in our world and the social and sensory stimuli that introverts are exposed to, it's even more important, to create that container of quiet. But again, that said, it is really critical in this day and age for all of our students, for all of our kids, and for all of us. I mean, we are bombarded by so much noise. That's informational, it's digital, that's auditory, and that's internal. That we need respite in order to really connect with ourselves and then be able to then go back and give out to the world. I really believe this.
Well said, Heidi. Also they say that most teachers are introverts, and you think about the daily stress that they're under with all the noise and activity. In our area, back to school night, there's a half day the next day because teachers are so fried. But we really need to do a better job giving our educators some solitude too, don't we?
We absolutely do. I mentioned that, for me, when I was in the classroom for over 20 years, and the pace of the schedule was, it was really nonstop. You had the bells, and it was actually bells and no passing time, and many schools still have this. And then teachers also have duties. You're on lunch duty, you're just constantly expected to be on. And so with schools that do not have like those cozy corners or quiet nooks or kind of built-in recharge time for the day, it can be like literally painful. And I really want to emphasize that. It can be painful for the introverted third to a half of our student and educator population to be constantly stimulated. Again, that's social and sensory stimuli. And so I also work with schools on literally revamping the physical plant. Those fluorescent lights overhead can be, they can just hit an introvert's nervous system in a way that literally is harmful. So even like muted lighting, other, scattering plants around a room, or, moving tables towards like a window so you can get, kind of a view of, even if it's not nature, so have more natural light can be incredibly helpful for, again, focusing on the introverts here, like the introverted temperament. But what we want to do is have all of our students in the optimal zone, for learning, for giving, for the giving and receiving of information. And so the environment is so important.
Absolutely. And it's so key that you said a third to one half of our students, parents hear that. Your introverted child is not alone. They're in great company with many wonderful thinkers and creative people. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And that is, so it's the natural proclivity of the introvert, to really take that processing time to turn inward. But if it's not even available, then imagine, you're really you're not only starving the extroverts, but obviously you're starving the introverts of what nurtures their ability to engage in deep thinking and creative thought.
Absolutely. So Dr. Kasevich, we don't have a lot of time, but great questions are coming in. Let's see how we can do kind of quickly. Okay.
Sure.
A really good one. Parent asks, my 16-year-old son wants no social contact outside of school. He spends all his free time on video games. I worry about this. Would you intervene or would you leave it alone?
I would go back to what I said about digital noise. My recommendation would be to sit down and examine how much time is being spent on those video games.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sweet spot that can be discovered, I think, and particularly with the help of a parent, between, kind of socializing on the one hand and alone time on the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think veering too much in one direction is not optimal for the well-being of our children. So honestly, like too much digital is not necessarily healthy. Too much socializing, not necessarily, socializing in person, not necessarily healthy either. So I think it's finding a balance and knowing that the human body, seen through the lens of introversion and extroversion, is like a battery. So we need to be aware of how much stimulation we can take in from the outside world. We don't want to veer too much in the opposite direction. Yeah. And we have the opportunity to stretch. So maybe if it's too much in that, what seems to me like a more internal world of video gaming, even though there are people on the other end, my recommendation would be to really have a conversation about how can we bring balance in, into our lives, so that there's a comfort zone that can be reached between alone and together. And we have to redefine that, of course, in a digital age.
Yes, and remember, parents, that balance doesn't mean static. You're still on a balance board. You're still going to have to be navigating that. So it doesn't mean that only one plan will work, as Dr. Kasevich reminds us.
Yes, and so that the energy management calendar that I mentioned, that could just be a day at a time. So you could think, sit down with your child and how much time are we going to spend on video games today? And what other things could we do?
Yeah. Good. Great suggestion. All right, here's a question I think is really important, really a good one. If the child does not understand that he or she is an introvert, they can easily feel less than. How can parents explain this to their child?
Yeah, I think going back to like how I initially defined introversion, extroversion is really important. So fundamentally has to do with your sensitivity to stimulation from the outside world. So going back to those questions, like how much social activity sort of makes you feel comfortable? How much light or noise makes you feel comfortable? And you can do honestly sort of, test it out. But these are the ways that self-awareness is where this all begins. And it is absolutely true that introverts who tend towards stillness, alone time, and solitude can often feel less than, because in our extroverted world, those tendencies can be stereotyped negatively, right? So these biases, often unconscious, come into play. You're antisocial, you're a loner, there's something wrong with you. And so there can be a beautiful moment in understanding that that is like my nervous system is more programmed to need quiet. And that's can be so freeing that you don't feel like there's something wrong with you. And that's the most beautiful moment that can happen. And then it's a matter of kind of figuring out and balancing in your life, the amount of, just loosely like calm and excitement that you can take, but you have to constantly be aware of it. I'll just share one other thing, a little personal story. Charlene, I was on a business trip last week, and I'm a deep introvert, and I go out in public and I give speeches and that sort of thing. But when it comes to my like hotel room, I always say I have to have a quiet room.
Yeah.
So in this last this last place where I was, I had to switch my room 3 times, which is also really hard because then you're readapting to your environment. But there was so much noise, like from the street or from like the radiator that went on and off, or from like flimsy walls or whatever. Like I just couldn't find that quiet, rejuvenating space. So I know like I have to be proactive in saying like, if I know I'm going to be on with the school for 8 hours and then out to dinner afterwards, I absolutely have to have quiet in my hotel room. Sometimes that's understood and sometimes it's not. And
Yeah.
so even as something as simple as that, I felt like I was on this weird quest for just like quiet in the hotel room, so it's just as a heads up, it's like for me, it's like a constant. At this point, that point, it was like a constant battle, like having to like 3 nights, 3 different rooms, kind of thing.
Alrighty.
And it's pain, like too much noise really can be painful.
Yeah, I hear you. So I know our time is coming to a close, but just quickly, Heidi,
Sure.
a parent who says, my kid is struggling, I'm not sure if they're an introvert or an extrovert. Do you have a scale or a resource to help people figure that out?
I actually do have a personality assessment that I have created. I'd be happy to share it with
All right.
your parent community. It's very simple. It's much simpler than like a Myers-Briggs, and it helps you easily assess like where you fall in terms of personality preferences, like what's your communication style, what's your social style, what's your recharging style, what's your working style, and then you can kind of see where you fall sort of on the spectrum. And I would be really happy to share that.
That would be great, Dr. Kasevich. We'll include that when we share out the video then. Okay, I would love to hear your final thoughts. This has been brilliant and so encouraging and helpful for parents of quiet and introverted kids. Final thoughts for us today, Dr. Kasevich.
Oh gosh, I mean, it's really about um, honoring the what I like to say, the plenitude of solitude. I think we have made strides in our culture in terms of honoring quiet. That silent book club connotes a cultural shift. We have a lot more work to do around quiet times, quiet spaces, quiet people, introverts in our world, so that we feel like as though we are on a level playing field, with the extroverts. But there still is a fair amount of bias that seeps into our mindsets and our cultures, when it comes to thinking about, who's a leader, and how we organize our school days and our classroom environments. There's still so much work to be done. And so I would just end on that, that I guess the twin ideas of the plenitude of solitude and looking forward to the work that we can all do together to honor quiet temperaments and quiet spaces and times in our school and I'd say workplace cultures too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Heidi Kasevich. The chat is filled full of all your thanks, everybody, for being here tonight and for really appreciating and enjoying this information. We hope to see you all soon. Take care, everybody. Good night and have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.